The conference room felt smaller when Victoria Walsh walked in wearing her designer heels and that smile that never reached her eyes. She dropped a thick contract on the mahogany table without looking at me once. "Mara, darling," she said in that fake sweet voice, "I won't be needing your input on this one. I'm Mara Daniel, and for the past 6 years, I've been the contracts manager for Walsh Industries. Every major deal, every partnership agreement, every legal document that keeps this $50 million company running smoothly goes through my desk first. I've saved this company from more lawsuits than I can count and negotiated deals that doubled their profits. But Victoria Walsh, my boss Nathan's wife, has never liked me. To her, I'm just another employee who takes up space in her building." Today, she was about to prove just how wrong that assumption was. "This is the Henderson manufacturing deal," she continued, flipping through pages she clearly hadn't read. "I've been handling the negotiations myself. We're signing today." My stomach dropped. Henderson Manufacturing. I'd been working on that deal for 8 months, building relationships, understanding their complex supply chain requirements. It was worth $12 million annually. "Victoria, I should probably review." She cut me off with a wave of her manicured hand. "That won't be necessary. I've got this covered." I watched Victoria gather the contract papers, her confidence radiating through the room like expensive perfume. She had no idea what she was holding. The Henderson deal wasn't just another sales agreement. It was an intricate web of performance clauses, liability terms, and penalty structures that took me months to understand. "Where's Nathan?" I asked, hoping my boss might bring some sense to this situation. "My husband is in Miami closing the Peterson account," Victoria replied, checking her phone. "He left me in charge of finalizing this deal. The Henderson team arrives in 2 hours." I felt my chest tighten. Nathan had no idea his wife was about to sign a contract she'd never properly reviewed. The Henderson representatives were tough negotiators who'd specifically requested that I be present for the final signing. They trusted my expertise. "Victoria, please let me just look over the terms one more time." I tried again. "There are some complicated clauses that—" "Mara," she interrupted, her voice sharp now. "I have an MBA from Stanford. I think I can handle a simple supply contract without help from someone who's— well, let's just say you're not exactly irrelevant to this process." Irrelevant. The word hit me like a slap. 6 years of 60-hour weeks, missed family dinners, and nights spent reviewing legal documents until my eyes burned. 6 years of protecting this company from costly mistakes. And I was irrelevant. I forced a smile. "Of course. You're absolutely right." Victoria spent the next hour in her temporary office, door closed, presumably reviewing the Henderson contract. I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen, my mind racing. The Henderson deal contained what I called landmine clauses, terms that seemed favorable on the surface but could detonate if triggered. The most dangerous was Clause 47C, the quality assurance provision. If Walsh Industries failed to meet Henderson's quality standards within the first 90 days, we'd owe them $2.3 million in penalties. But here's what Victoria didn't know. Henderson's quality standards weren't clearly defined in the contract. They could claim anything was substandard and demand payment. I'd been negotiating with their legal team for weeks to clarify those standards. We were supposed to add an appendix defining exactly what constituted acceptable quality. Without that appendix, signing the contract was like handing Henderson a blank check. My phone buzzed. A text from Nathan in Miami. "How's the Henderson deal looking? Victoria says she's handling it. Make sure everything's perfect." I stared at the message for a long moment. I could call him right now, explain the situation, probably save the company millions. But Victoria's words echoed in my head. Irrelevant. I typed back, "She's got it under control." If I was irrelevant, then maybe it was time to let them discover just how much they needed my relevance. At exactly 2 p.m., the Henderson manufacturing team arrived. 3 serious-looking executives in matching grey suits, led by their CEO, James Henderson himself. I recognized him immediately from our video calls over the past months. He was a shrewd businessman who didn't believe in leaving money on the table. Victoria greeted them in the main conference room, all smiles and handshakes. Through the glass walls, I watched her gesture confidently as she spoke. James Henderson's eyes scanned the room, clearly looking for someone. My phone rang. Mara Daniel. Ms. Daniel, this is James Henderson. I'm in your conference room, but I don't see you here. Weren't you supposed to be part of this final meeting? I glanced toward the conference room where Victoria was spreading contract pages across the table. Actually, Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Walsh is handling the final signing today. She felt my presence wasn't necessary. There was a pause. I see. Well, I specifically requested that you be present because you understand our operational requirements better than anyone on your team. I appreciate that, Mr. Henderson, but Mrs. Walsh has made it clear that she's fully prepared to finalize this deal without my input. Another pause, longer this time. Understood. We'll proceed as planned then. He hung up. Through the glass, I watched him return to his seat with a slight frown. He said something to Victoria, who glanced in my direction with an annoyed expression. She shook her head and pointed to the contracts. Game on. The signing ceremony was surprisingly quick. Victoria sat at the head of the table, pen poised over the signature pages like she was signing a peace treaty. The Henderson team watched carefully as she flipped through each section, barely pausing to read the fine print. This looks excellent, Victoria announced to the room. Walsh Industries is excited to partner with Henderson Manufacturing. James Henderson nodded politely, but I caught him exchanging glances with his legal counsel. They knew something Victoria didn't. They'd structured this contract specifically to their advantage, counting on our thorough review process to catch the problematic clauses and negotiate changes. With me sidelined, there was no review process. Victoria signed her name with a flourish on page 12. Then page 18. Finally, the signature page. Each stroke of her pen was another nail in Walsh Industries' financial coffin. Congratulations, James Henderson said, shaking Victoria's hand. We look forward to a profitable partnership. The word profitable hung in the air with double meaning. Profitable for Henderson, certainly. For Walsh Industries, not so much. After the Henderson team left, Victoria practically floated back to her office. She called Nathan immediately, her voice carrying through the thin walls. Darling, I closed the Henderson deal. 12 million annually, just like we discussed. Yes, it went perfectly. No problems at all. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out my personal copy of the Henderson contract, the version with all my handwritten notes about the dangerous clauses. In 90 days, Victoria would understand exactly what those notes meant. 3 days passed in blissful ignorance. Victoria strutted around the office like she'd conquered the business world, telling anyone who'd listen about her successful negotiation with Henderson Manufacturing. She even called a staff meeting to announce her triumph. This is how deals get done in the real world, she proclaimed from the front of the conference room. Sometimes you need someone with fresh eyes and real business education to see opportunities that others might miss. Several employees glanced at me during her speech. They knew I'd been working on the Henderson deal for months. But I just sat quietly in the back row, taking notes like the irrelevant employee I apparently was. Nathan returned from Miami that Thursday, beaming about both deals, his successful Peterson account closure and Victoria's Henderson achievement. He took us both out for a celebratory dinner at the city's most expensive steakhouse. I'm proud of both of you, he said, raising his wine glass. Victoria, you've shown real leadership potential. And Mara, I know you supported her throughout this process. I smiled and raised my glass. Just doing my job. Under the table, my phone buzzed with a calendar reminder I'd set 3 months ago. Henderson quality audit begins in 87 days. Victoria ordered the most expensive item on the menu, lobster with truffle sauce. She was celebrating now, but in less than 3 months, she'd be choking on those truffles. The landmine was buried and ticking. 2 weeks later, the first Henderson delivery arrived. 40 pallets of specialty components that Walsh Industries would incorporate into our manufacturing process. I watched from my office window as the trucks unloaded, each box stamped with Henderson's logo and quality certification numbers. What Victoria didn't realize was that Henderson had shipped us their lowest grade materials within the contract specifications. Technically compliant, but barely. They were testing our quality control processes, waiting to see if we'd catch the subtle differences. Our production manager, Billy Santos, knocked on my door that afternoon. Billy had worked manufacturing for 15 years and could spot quality issues from across the factory floor. "Mara, we got a problem with the Henderson materials," he said, dropping a sample component on my desk. "This stuff meets the basic specs, but it's gonna cause issues down the line. Should I flag this?" I examined the component. It looked fine to untrained eyes, but Billy was right. The metal composition was at the minimum acceptable threshold. It would pass initial inspections but might fail under stress testing. "What does the contract say about material quality?" Billy asked. I pulled up the Henderson contract on my computer, scrolling to the relevant section. According to the agreement Victoria signed, Henderson only needs to meet industry standard specifications. There's no definition of what those standards actually are. Billy frowned. "So they can send us bottom barrel stuff and claim it's industry standard?" "Technically, yes. Shouldn't we tell Victoria about this?" I looked at the component again, then at Billy's concerned expression. Victoria made it very clear that she doesn't need my input on Henderson-related issues. She's got everything under control. The quality issues multiplied over the following weeks. 3 separate batches of Henderson materials arrived with problems that were technically within contract specifications but practically problematic. Our production line started experiencing minor delays as workers had to spend extra time compensating for inferior components. Billy kept bringing concerns to my attention, and I kept giving him the same response: "Take it up with Victoria. She's managing the Henderson relationship now." But Billy wasn't getting anywhere with Victoria. She'd brush off his concerns, telling him to make it work or stop being so picky. She had no understanding of how manufacturing actually functioned. Meanwhile, I started documenting everything. Every quality issue, every production delay, every conversation where Billy raised concerns and Victoria dismissed them. My files grew thicker by the day. The beautiful thing about Victoria's position was that she'd taken full ownership of the Henderson deal. In writing, the contract signature was hers, the decision-making authority was hers, and most importantly, the responsibility for any problems was entirely hers. Nathan, still basking in the glow of 2 successful deals, remained blissfully unaware of the growing storm clouds. He was already talking about expanding into new markets, confident that his wife had proven herself as a business leader. Victoria had wanted to show everyone that I was irrelevant. Soon, she'd discover just how wrong she was. The countdown continued. 62 days until Henderson's quality audit. By week 6, our production efficiency had dropped by 12%. The inferior Henderson materials were causing cascading problems throughout our manufacturing process. Components that should have taken 2 hours to assemble now took 3. Quality control inspections that used to pass 95% of products now passed only 80%. Billy was getting desperate. He cornered me in the parking garage after work, his face flushed with frustration. "Mara, this is getting crazy," he said, glancing around to make sure we were alone. "Victoria won't listen to me. She keeps saying the problem's our fault, not Henderson's. But I've been doing this for 15 years. I know substandard materials when I see them." I leaned against my car, choosing my words carefully. "Billy, what exactly has Victoria said about the quality issues?" "She told me to figure it out and stop making excuses. Yesterday, she actually accused me of sabotaging production to make her look bad." His voice cracked with disbelief. 23 years I've worked for this company, and she thinks I'm sabotaging it. The pieces were falling into place perfectly. Victoria wasn't just ignoring the quality problems. She was actively antagonizing the people trying to solve them. She was digging her own grave deeper every day. "Have you documented these conversations with Victoria?" I asked. "Some of them. Why?" "Just keep doing your job, Billy. Follow proper protocols, document everything, and let the chips fall where they may." He nodded slowly, understanding the subtext. And if anyone asks, I came to you for advice because you're the contracts expert, right? Exactly. You're just trying to understand our contractual obligations. Week 8 brought the first customer complaint. Morrison Electronics, one of our biggest clients, rejected an entire shipment of products made with Henderson components. The parts met basic specifications but failed Morrison's stress testing. Victoria panicked. She called an emergency meeting with the entire management team, her composure finally cracking. This is unacceptable, she declared, pacing back and forth in the conference room. Someone needs to explain to me how our quality control failed so badly. Billy cleared his throat. I've been raising concerns about the Henderson materials for weeks. The components meet minimum specifications, but they're not suitable for high-stress applications like Morrison requires. Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. Are you saying this is Henderson's fault? I'm saying the materials they're providing under our current contract aren't adequate for our manufacturing needs. That's ridiculous. I negotiated that contract personally. Henderson is a reputable company. Billy glanced at me, then back at Victoria. Maybe we should review the quality specifications in the contract. Victoria looked around the room, her confidence wavering for the first time since she'd taken over the Henderson deal. Mara, you have a copy of the contract, right? What do the quality specifications say? Every eye in the room turned to me. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Henderson contract. According to Section 12A, Henderson is required to provide materials meeting industry standard specifications. There you go, Victoria said, relief flooding her voice. Industry standard. That should be sufficient. I paused, letting the silence build. However, there's no definition in the contract of what industry standard actually means. The room went quiet. Victoria stared at me across the conference table, her face pale. What do you mean there's no definition? I turned my laptop screen toward the group, highlighting the relevant contract section. Section 12A states that materials must meet industry standard specifications, but there's no appendix or additional documentation defining what those standards are. In legal terms, this language is essentially meaningless. Billy leaned forward. So Henderson can send us anything they want as long as they claim it's industry standard. Technically, yes. Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the contract copy. But that can't be right. I negotiated this deal carefully. Nathan, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. Victoria, didn't you have the legal team review this before signing? The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Victoria looked at Nathan, then at me, then back at Nathan. I handled the negotiations myself. Mara said the contract was fine. Every head turned toward me again. I felt like I was center stage in a play I'd been rehearsing for months. Actually, I said carefully, you specifically told me that my input wasn't necessary. You said you had everything under control and that I was irrelevant to the process. The silence was deafening. Nathan's face went through several emotions: confusion, realization, then a slow-burning anger. Victoria, he said quietly, please tell me you didn't sign a $12 million contract without legal review. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She'd painted herself into a corner, and everyone in the room could see it. The meeting ended with Nathan asking everyone except Victoria and me to leave the room. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Explain to me what happened, Nathan said, his voice dangerously calm. Victoria jumped in first. I was handling the Henderson negotiations, and Mara was supposed to support me. She should have caught this issue before I signed. I remained silent, waiting. Nathan turned to me. Mara. I pulled out my phone and opened my voice recording app. Over the past months, I'd started recording important conversations after Victoria's first dismissive meeting. May I asked, gesturing to the phone. Nathan nodded. I played back Victoria's voice from 2 months ago. I won't be needing your input on this one. I've got this covered. You're not exactly irrelevant to this process. The recording continued with her refusing my offers to review the contract and dismissing my expertise. Victoria's face turned bright red. "You recorded me." "I recorded our business meetings to ensure accurate documentation of decisions made regarding company contracts," I replied professionally. "It's standard practice in contract management." Nathan looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "Victoria, you signed a $12 million contract without legal review and explicitly prevented our contracts manager from participating in the process." "I have an MBA." Victoria protested. "I'm qualified to negotiate deals." "An MBA doesn't make you a lawyer," Nathan said coldly. "And it certainly doesn't give you the authority to override established company procedures." The beautiful thing was, I didn't have to destroy Victoria. She was doing it herself. Over the weekend, Nathan called an emergency session with the company's law firm. Victoria, Nathan, and I sat in the attorney's conference room while senior partner Harold Blackstone reviewed the Henderson contract. Harold was 72 years old and had been practicing corporate law since before Victoria was born. He read contracts the way other people read novels, quickly, thoroughly, and with an eye for trouble. "This is problematic," Harold said after 20 minutes of review. "The quality specifications language is so vague it's practically unenforceable. Any dispute would likely favor Henderson's interpretation." Victoria shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "But they're a reputable company. Surely they wouldn't try to take advantage of unclear language." Harold looked at her over his reading glasses. "Mrs. Walsh, in my experience, reputable companies often have the most aggressive legal teams. They structure contracts to their advantage and expect the other party to negotiate fair terms. The fact that you didn't suggests either incompetence or agreement with their position." Nathan rubbed his temples. "What are our options?" "Limited," Harold replied. "You could try to renegotiate, but Henderson has no incentive to agree to less favorable terms. You could breach the contract and pay penalties, but that would likely cost more than fulfilling the agreement. Or you can hope Henderson acts in good faith for the remainder of the contract period." "How long is the contract period?" Nathan asked. Harold flipped to the final page. 5 years, with automatic renewal unless terminated with 6 months' notice. Nathan's face went white. 5 years of substandard materials. "Unless Henderson chooses to provide better quality out of goodwill," Harold confirmed. Victoria looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Her moment of triumph was turning into a corporate nightmare. The following Monday brought worse news. Henderson's quality audit team arrived unannounced, 3 weeks earlier than the contract specified. They had every right to do this under the terms Victoria had agreed to. I watched from my office as the Henderson auditors spread throughout our facility, clipboards in hand, examining every aspect of our production process. They were looking for quality failures that would trigger the penalty clauses. Billy found me at lunch. "They're being real thorough," he reported. "Checking everything twice, taking photos, asking lots of questions about our processes." "Finding any problems?" "Not with our processes, but they keep asking about the final product quality. They seem real interested in the stress test failures we've been having." My stomach tightened. The Henderson auditors weren't here to verify our processes were adequate. They were building a case that our quality control was insufficient, which would trigger the massive penalty clauses. Victoria spent the day following the auditors around, trying to charm them with coffee and small talk. She had no idea they were documenting everything she said, building their legal case one friendly conversation at a time. By 4 p.m., the audit team had finished their inspection. Their lead auditor, a stern woman named Patricia Cross, requested a meeting with senior management. Nathan, Victoria, and I gathered in the main conference room while Patricia spread photos and documentation across the table. "We've identified several quality control deficiencies," Patricia announced without preamble. Victoria's face went pale. "What kind of deficiencies?" Patricia consulted her notes. "Inconsistent stress testing protocols, inadequate documentation of quality failures, and insufficient response to identified material problems." Each word was a nail in Victoria's coffin. Patricia continued her devastating assessment. According to Section 15C of our contract, Walsh Industries is required to maintain exemplary quality standards throughout the manufacturing process. Our audit shows multiple failures to meet this requirement. Nathan leaned forward. Can you be more specific about what constitutes exemplary quality standards? Patricia smiled coldly. The contract defines exemplary as exceeding industry norms by a significant margin. Our quality specialists have determined that your current processes fall short of this standard. I bit my tongue to keep from laughing. This was the exact trap I'd tried to warn Victoria about. Exemplary quality standards were subjective language that Henderson could interpret however they wanted. Victoria looked confused. But our products meet all the basic specifications. We haven't had any major quality failures. Mrs. Walsh, Patricia replied, meeting basic specifications isn't the same as maintaining exemplary standards. The Morrison Electronics rejection, the production delays, the stress test failures, all of these indicate systematic quality problems. Those problems are caused by your materials. Victoria blurted out. The room went silent. Patricia raised an eyebrow and made a note on her pad. Are you suggesting that Henderson Manufacturing provided substandard materials? Patricia asked. Nathan shot Victoria a warning look, but it was too late. Well, not substandard exactly, but they're causing problems in our production process, Victoria said, digging herself deeper. Patricia made another note. I see. So Walsh Industries is claiming that Henderson's materials, which meet all contracted specifications, are somehow inadequate for your manufacturing needs. Victoria realized her mistake too late. I didn't mean. Thank you for clarifying, Patricia said with a predatory smile. That will be very helpful for our final assessment. The audit team left that afternoon with boxes of documentation and hundreds of photos. Patricia handed Nathan a formal notice before departing. You'll receive our official findings within 10 business days, she said. If quality deficiencies are confirmed, the penalty provisions in Section 47C will take effect immediately. After they left, Nathan slumped in his chair like all the air had been sucked out of him. Victoria, please tell me you understand what just happened, he said. Victoria looked genuinely confused. They're being unreasonable. Our quality is fine. I pulled out the contract and flipped to Section 47C. Actually, Henderson has the right to determine what constitutes exemplary quality standards. If they decide we're not meeting those standards, we owe them $2.3 million in penalties. That's ridiculous. Victoria protested. They can't just make up standards after the contract is signed. Nathan turned to me. Can they? I nodded grimly. The language Victoria agreed to gives Henderson broad discretion in defining quality requirements. We have no legal recourse if they determine we're deficient. But that's not fair. Victoria said. It's what you signed, Nathan replied coldly. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Victoria seemed to grasp the magnitude of what she'd done. Her face went white as the implications sank in. Nathan, I didn't realize. You didn't realize because you refused to let Mara review the contract. You said her input was irrelevant. The word irrelevant hung in the air like a verdict. Henderson's formal audit results arrived exactly 10 business days later via certified mail. Nathan called an emergency board meeting to review the findings. The report was 23 pages of detailed quality deficiencies, each one carefully documented with photos and measurements. Henderson had identified problems with everything from documentation procedures to equipment calibration. Most devastating was their conclusion. Walsh Industries has failed to maintain exemplary quality standards as required under Section 15C of the Manufacturing Agreement. Penalty provisions under Section 47C are hereby invoked. $2.3 million. Due within 30 days. Board Chairman William Torres read the report aloud while Nathan, Victoria, and I sat at the conference table. The other board members' faces grew increasingly grim as Torres detailed each quality failure. How is this possible? Board member Janet Pierce asked. We've never had major quality issues before. Nathan looked at Victoria. Would you like to explain? Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. The Henderson contract had some unclear language about quality standards. Unclear how? Torres pressed. I opened my laptop and projected the contract language onto the conference room screen. Section 15C requires exemplary quality standards but provides no definition of what exemplary means. Henderson has interpreted this to mean exceeding industry norms by a significant margin. And who negotiated this language? Pierce asked. The room fell silent. Everyone knew the answer, but nobody wanted to say it out loud. Victoria finally spoke. I did. Without legal review? Torres asked. Victoria nodded miserably. Torres looked at Nathan. Where was our contracts manager during this negotiation? Nathan's jaw tightened. Mara offered to review the contract multiple times. Victoria declined her assistance. The board meeting continued for another hour as members tried to understand how a routine supply contract had become a $2.3 million liability. Victoria sat silent while Nathan explained the timeline of events. So let me get this straight, Pierce said. Victoria negotiated this contract independently, refused legal review, explicitly excluded our contracts expert, and agreed to subjective quality standards that Henderson could interpret however they wanted. That's correct, Nathan confirmed.
And now Henderson is claiming we owe them $2.3 million because our quality doesn't meet their undefined standards? Also correct. Pierce turned to Victoria. Mrs. Walsh, what exactly did you think would happen when you signed a contract with such vague language? Victoria's composure finally cracked. I thought I was saving the company money by handling the negotiation myself instead of involving expensive lawyers and consultants. Expensive lawyers? Torres repeated incredulously. Mara is a salaried employee. Her review would have cost us nothing. But she's just a contracts manager, Victoria protested. I have an MBA from Stanford. I'm qualified to negotiate business deals. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Torres and Pierce exchanged glances that could have frozen water. Mrs. Walsh, Torres said slowly, Mara has saved this company millions of dollars over the past 6 years by catching exactly these kinds of contractual problems. Her expertise is the reason we've never faced a situation like this before. Victoria looked around the room, finally realizing that every board member was staring at her with barely concealed anger. I was trying to help, she whispered. You've helped us into a $2.3 million hole, Pierce replied coldly. The board voted unanimously to pursue all available legal options to challenge Henderson's penalty claim. However, Harold Blackstone's preliminary review was not encouraging. The language is subjective, but Henderson has documented their case thoroughly, Harold explained during a follow-up meeting. Their audit identified genuine quality issues, even if those issues were caused by the materials they provided. That's insane, Victoria said. They're penalizing us for problems their own materials created. It's brilliant contract writing, Harold corrected. They provided materials that met minimum specifications while knowing those materials would cause quality problems. Then they used those problems to justify penalty claims. Nathan looked sick. So, we have no recourse? Limited options. We could argue that Henderson acted in bad faith, but proving that would require demonstrating they intentionally provided inferior materials. That's a difficult case to make when the materials technically meet contract specifications. What about the fact that they conducted the audit 3 weeks early? I asked. Harold checked the contract. Section 23B allows quality audits at any time during the contract period with reasonable notice. They provided 48 hours notice, which courts would likely consider reasonable. Victoria slumped in her chair. There has to be something we can do. Harold looked at her with the expression lawyers reserved for particularly difficult clients. Mrs. Walsh, the time to address these issues was before you signed the contract, not after. Once you put your signature on that document, you committed Walsh Industries to Henderson's terms. But I didn't understand what those terms meant. That's precisely why companies have contracts managers and legal departments, Harold replied, to ensure decision-makers understand exactly what they're agreeing to. 2 weeks later, Henderson rejected our request to waive the penalty fees. Their response was polite but firm. Walsh Industries had failed to meet contractual obligations, and payment was due within 15 days. Nathan called another emergency board meeting. This time, the agenda had only one item: damage control. "We have 3 options," Nathan explained to the assembled board members. "Pay the $2.3 million penalty, fight it in court and probably lose, or find a way to negotiate a settlement." "What kind of settlement?" Torres asked. Henderson has indicated they might accept $1.8 million to close the matter quickly.
Pierce shook her head.
"So our best-case scenario is losing almost $2 million because Victoria wanted to prove she could negotiate contracts." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Victoria hadn't attended this meeting. Nathan had asked her to stay home while the board discussed sensitive financial matters. "There's one more option," I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. Henderson's contract has a termination clause. Section 31A allows either party to cancel the agreement with 6 months' notice and payment of early termination fees. Torres leaned forward. "How much are the termination fees?" I pulled up the contract on my laptop. For Walsh Industries, $500,000. The room went silent as everyone processed the numbers. Pay $1.8 million to settle the current penalty, or pay $500,000 to escape the contract entirely. "But we'd lose the Henderson supply relationship," Nathan pointed out. "The Henderson supply relationship is what got us into this mess," Pierce replied. "Their materials are causing our quality problems." Torres nodded slowly. "So, we pay $500,000 to terminate the contract and find a new supplier?" "That would be my recommendation," I said. The board voted 4-1 to terminate the Henderson contract and pay the early termination fee. The single dissenting vote came from Nathan, who seemed torn between protecting his wife and protecting his company. "This feels like we're admitting defeat," Nathan said after the vote. "We're admitting that Victoria made a costly mistake and taking action to minimize further damage," Torres replied bluntly. Over the next week, I worked with Harold Blackstone to prepare the contract termination notice. Henderson tried to negotiate, offering to reduce the penalty to $1.2 million if we maintain the supply relationship. "They're scared," Harold observed during one of our preparation meetings. "They know they set us up, and they're worried we might find grounds to challenge the entire contract." "Do we have grounds?" I asked. "Possibly. If we could prove Henderson deliberately provided substandard materials while knowing it would trigger penalty clauses, we might have a case for contract fraud. But proving intent would be expensive and time-consuming. In the end, Walsh Industries paid the $500,000 termination fee and severed all relationships with Henderson Manufacturing. We found a new supplier within 2 weeks, one whose contracts I reviewed very carefully. The total cost of Victoria's irrelevant comment, $500,000 in termination fees, plus approximately $200,000 in production delays and quality issues. Victoria's MBA from Stanford, $180,000 in tuition costs. The look on her face when she realized her mistake, priceless. But the story wasn't over yet. 3 weeks after the Henderson contract termination, Nathan called me into his office. Victoria was there, sitting in the chair across from his desk with red-rimmed eyes and tissues in her hand. "Mara, please sit down," Nathan said. His voice sounded tired, like he'd aged years in the past months. I took the remaining chair, positioning myself to see both Nathan and Victoria. "We need to discuss what happened with the Henderson contract," Nathan continued. "Victoria has something she wants to say to you." Victoria looked up at me, her usual confidence completely gone. "Mara, I owe you an apology. I was wrong to exclude you from the contract negotiation, and I was wrong to say you were irrelevant to the process." I nodded, but remained silent. "I cost the company a lot of money because I was too proud to admit I needed your expertise," Victoria continued. "I'm sorry." Nathan leaned forward. "Mara, I know Victoria's actions put you in an impossible position. You tried to help, and she refused your input. But I need to ask, why didn't you come to me directly when you realized the contract had problems?" This was the question I'd been expecting. I chose my words carefully. Nathan, Victoria made it very clear that she had full authority over the Henderson deal and that my input wasn't welcome. When I tried to review the contract, she told me she had everything under control. I respected her decision-making authority. But you knew the contract was problematic, Nathan pressed. I suspected it might have issues, but Victoria was confident in her negotiation. I assumed she had information or assurances that I wasn't aware of. It was technically true, if not complete truth. Nathan studied my face for a long moment. He was a smart businessman, and I could see him working through the implications of what I'd said. Mara, in the future, if you see potential problems with any contract or business decision, I want you to come directly to me, regardless of who's handling the negotiation. Of course, I agreed. Victoria shifted in her chair. Nathan, I think we should also discuss my role going forward. Maybe I should step back from business operations and focus on other areas. Nathan's expression was unreadable. We'll discuss that privately. After I left Nathan's office, I returned to my desk and opened my email. There was a message from James Henderson with the subject line, "Thank you." I opened it with curiosity. Ms. Daniel, I wanted to personally thank you for your professionalism throughout our recent contract negotiations. While the business relationship with Walsh Industries didn't work out as planned, I was impressed by your expertise and integrity. Henderson Manufacturing is always looking for talented contracts professionals, and I'd be happy to discuss potential opportunities if you're ever interested in a change. I stared at the email for several minutes. James Henderson knew exactly what had happened. He'd structured the contract to take advantage of inexperienced negotiators, counting on Walsh Industries' normal review process to catch the problems and force renegotiation. When Victoria excluded me from the process, Henderson saw an opportunity and took it. The beautiful irony was that Henderson respected my expertise more than my own company had, at least until Victoria's costly mistake forced everyone to recognize my value. I deleted the email without responding, but I saved Henderson's contact information, just in case. 6 months later, Walsh Industries had fully recovered from the Henderson debacle. Our new supplier provided higher quality materials at better prices, and our production efficiency had returned to normal levels. Victoria gradually faded from active involvement in company operations. Nathan never officially announced her departure, but she stopped attending meetings and rarely visited the office. The few times I saw her, she looked tired and embarrassed. Nathan, meanwhile, treated me with new respect. He gave me a significant raise and expanded my responsibilities to include review of all major business decisions, not just contracts. I should have trusted your expertise from the beginning, he told me during my performance review. Victoria's mistake taught me the value of the systems and people we already had in place. The other employees noticed the shift in my status. People who used to treat me as just another mid-level manager now sought my input on important decisions. Billy Santos even thanked me for handling the Henderson situation professionally. You could have thrown Victoria under the bus from day one, he said. Instead, you let her make her own choices and face the consequences. That took real class. I appreciated the sentiment, but the truth was simpler. I hadn't needed to throw Victoria under the bus. She'd done it herself by refusing to recognize the expertise right under her nose. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people reveal their own incompetence. The Henderson contract crisis had transformed me from an irrelevant employee into the person Nathan consulted before making any major decision. Victoria had been wrong about many things, but she'd been especially wrong about my relevance. A year later, I was promoted to Vice President of Strategic Operations, with direct oversight of all major contracts and business partnerships. My salary had doubled, and I now had the corner office that used to belong to the previous VP who'd retired. Nathan announced my promotion at the company-wide meeting, praising my expertise and professionalism throughout the Henderson situation. Mara's careful review and management of our business relationships has saved Walsh Industries millions of dollars over the years, he told the assembled employees. Her promotion recognizes the critical value she brings to our organization. After the meeting, several colleagues congratulated me on the promotion. A few mentioned how different things might have been if I'd been involved in the Henderson negotiation from the beginning. Water under the bridge, I replied diplomatically. That evening, I was packing up my old office when I found a folder I'd forgotten about, my original notes on the Henderson contract from 10 months ago. Page after page of warnings about vague language, undefined terms, and potential penalty triggers. All the problems that eventually cost Walsh Industries $500,000 had been identified before Victoria ever signed the contract. I looked at those notes for a long moment, then fed them into the paper shredder beside my desk. There was no point dwelling on what might have been. Victoria had called me irrelevant and excluded me from one of the most important contracts in company history. In doing so, she'd inadvertently proven just how relevant I actually was. Sometimes the best way to demonstrate your value isn't to fight for recognition. It's to let others discover what happens when they try to succeed without you. The Henderson contract had been Victoria's moment to shine. Instead, it became the spotlight that revealed my indispensable role in keeping Walsh Industries profitable and protected. I smiled as I turned off the lights in my old office. Tomorrow, I'd start working in my new corner office with the view of the city skyline. Irrelevant employees don't get corner offices. But then again, I'd never been irrelevant in the first place.